Yo, what's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about issues on a carnivore diet or primal diet that people commonly experience when they first get into practicing this lifestyle. So, if you're practicing a carnivore diet, maybe you just got into it, maybe you're practicing more of a primal approach, or just somewhere in between, stay tuned and let's go over some issues and what you can do to remedy them. All right, so first issue. So I first got into eating animal foods again after a plant-based diet through AAJONUS VONDERPLANITZ's work, and he doesn't particularly promote a carnivorous diet, but he promotes a primal approach, which includes raw dairy products, and he's really a strong proponent on just a raw food diet in general, based around animal foods. And so that's where I started. I've since then made some adjustments that I enjoy and they work a bit better for me. But in the beginning, I'd say the first 6 months, I was pretty strict, just like raw primal. And so the biggest, the number one issue I had during that 6-month period of time was when I would incorporate some dairy here and there, some raw dairy. I would go to a farm and get some raw milk, like some raw goat milk, and I wouldn't let it sit out for at least 24 hours. And this just creates indigestion. It doesn't allow the body to properly digest the proteins. But what I would do is say maybe I would have a meal with some meat, and then I'd wait a couple hours, but then I would drink some raw milk and it would create indigestion, fermentation, and it just didn't work very well for me. So what I have learned is that if you're going to include some dairy, I highly recommend like raw dairy that's been fermented from a quality source. So what I do with my dairy, like my raw milk now, is I let it sit out on the counter for say, 1, 2, 3, 4 days, and I let it ferment, and I let the bacteria eat up all the sugar, and this makes it into like a probiotic, you could say. So it actually helps my digestion now. By letting it sit out at least 24 hours, it allows the proteins in the milk to become more digestible, and this helped me extremely. So now even if I wanted to consume a meal and then drink like a small glass of the fermented milk right afterwards, I have no issues, no gas, no bloating, and so it works really well for me. I highly recommend it. Don't refrigerate the milk products. They're just not going to digest very well. Number 2, so histamine reactions. This is pretty common amongst people getting into a carnivore approach, especially people that don't focus on as quality of food and they're eating more of like the processed meats. These tend to contain high levels of histamine. The longer meat sits out, the more histamine potentially develops in it, especially in the lower quality meat. And so if you eat meat and you're getting like itchy and you have maybe some gas, bloating. I mean, the main one is like what I see is like the itchiness and just like have this like uncomfortable itchy reaction. It could possibly be histamine, because some people do have histamine intolerance, or they're relatively sensitive to histamine because they naturally contain higher levels of histamine in their body, and it kind of puts them over the top when they consume high histamine foods. And so what I would recommend for this is going straight to your butcher and actually getting your meat fresh, like completely fresh. And then if you're not going to eat it that same day, freeze it. So fresh, frozen, and fresh are 2 ways to really reduce the amount of histamine found in food. And then I'll also put a link below with some more information. But yeah, avoid the processed stuff like the sausages and the deli meats and salami and stuff like that. Those are where you'll find like the incredibly high levels of histamine. 3, low energy levels. Man, the adaptation phase can be a nightmare for people. It wasn't for me in particular. Like I actually experienced a 2 or 3 fold increase in energy like that same day and from there on out. But what I see in other people is that they can have a bit of a hard time getting through that adaptation phase. The initial adaptation phase is probably around 30 days or so. between 2 weeks and 30 days, it can be super challenging for some people, especially if they have metabolic issues. If they were on like a high carbohydrate diet and their body's not very well adapted to eating fat, then this could just take even longer. And some other issues during the adaptation phase besides low energy would be cramping and digestive issues. So I'll just address the cramping first. And this tends to come from low electrolyte levels, especially like low potassium, magnesium levels. So in the beginning, I've seen it beneficial for people to increase their salt intake, not just any salt, but like a really good source of like quality salt, not sea salt, but maybe pink Himalayan salt. Or there's also one called no salt, which has higher amounts of potassium. And then another one called Redmond salt if you're living in the United States. That way you can avoid cramping and keep your electrolytes up. It's more important to increase the sodium and electrolyte levels on a zero fiber, zero carbohydrate diet. The other one was digestive issues. And so what I tend to see is people who begin their adaptation phase might experience gas, bloating, diarrhea, like loose stools, brain fog, like just nausea in general. And this could be quite a few different things. Maybe their ratios of fat to protein are off. Maybe they're consuming way too much fat, not enough protein, or vice versa. So it helps to play with the levels. I like to be around 25% protein, 75% fat. The main source of my calories are coming from, I'd say like beef fat, organ meats, and then I eat maybe like a half pound of beef a day. And so that's what works best for me. But so play with those, and then also your gut microbiome is like shifting majorly because all these bacteria in your digestive tract within the, well, hopefully they're not really so much in the small intestine, but mostly in the colon, they're going to be dying off and they're going to be leaving your body because they no longer have a source of food, which is coming from the fiber. And so as these bacteria leave your body and they die off and starve to death, there's going to be some uncomfortable sensations. There might be some signals to eat carbohydrates as these things die off. So, just really focus for those first 30 days if you're trying to adapt as quickly as possible. But here's the thing, guys, there's no right or wrong way to do this. You can take your time and just slowly transition if that works better for you, or you can dive right in. It's totally up to you. Like there's no right or wrong way to do this. Like, let's not be dogmatic and say you have to do it this way. Obviously it's going to take longer to adapt if you do it slowly, but that might work better for some people in their lifestyle. Just reduce the amount of carbohydrates and increase the amount of animal foods. But people can have some pretty intense reactions. I know I definitely had some like stomach cramping, some diarrhea, some uncomfortability for like the first couple weeks. And I watched one of my best friends go through a much more challenging adaptation phase. But now he's doing extremely well. But the first 30 days were just really intense. So it's really common. I wouldn't be too scared if you got some cramps and some digestion issues. There's just like major changes going on. Too much protein. A lot of people are saying like on this carnivorous diet that you can't get too much protein and just like protein's the king. For me personally, I found that I just got really stinky if I had like too much. And so what I did is I toned down the amount of protein and I increased the amount of nutrient-dense foods like organ meats and beef fat. And then I started to stink a lot less and feel a bit better as well too. And I haven't lost any muscle by decreasing my amount of protein. I could be a little bit off on this, but I probably get maybe 100 to 150 grams of protein a day, which isn't a crazy amount. And I'm still doing just fine, building muscle. I'm continuously hitting new PRs in the gym and making gains. So I found by just increasing my nutrient density and the fat, it worked a little bit better for me. So once again, I just had to play with those ratios and find what worked best for me. Maybe over time I might increase the protein as my body becomes more adapted. Number 5, cost. Cost can be a big one, especially depending on where you live. Cuts of meat can be extremely expensive, but one major benefit of this is that in today's age, the lean meats, which are definitely less nutritious and less desirable from a health standpoint, are the most expensive and the most beneficial foods, and the most sacred of foods from the standpoint of traditional peoples is the least expensive now. So that would be like the fats, the organ meats, and so I'm definitely happy with that one. But it can also be hard to find like a quality source of food. Here in Finland, I'm like super blessed because I get local, organic, raised in the wild foods like marrow and fat and organ meats and even the beef itself. And so, for me personally, I want to consume the highest quality foods that I can possibly find. And I also want to be consuming animal foods coming from a factory commercial source, because I definitely don't want to be supporting those industries, because I see how destructive they are, and then on the other hand, I see how beneficial animal husbandry and the raising of animals can be when they're in more of their natural environment. So on these natural grasslands, or maybe putting them on land that was used for farming, and now these animals are helping to regenerate the ecosystem through eating the grass, and then they excrete their poop, and then it helps to inoculate the soil with healthy bacteria, and then it kind of jump starts the regeneration of the soil and the land, and then one day forests can grow there. So there are definite benefits of using animals to regenerate the land. I should probably put a video down below so you guys can look more into that. And so those are the types of processes I want to personally be supporting. So just ask around, look into local Facebook groups, maybe try to find local farms and give them a call. You kind of have to do some searching on this one. It's going to be different depending on where you go. All right, number 6, and that's palatability. The organs especially, man, the first time I ate liver, I was just it was twisted. But I've since then developed more of a taste for it. And so it's just got to be consistent with it. I'm not saying sit down and try to eat a whole liver every day, but just have a little bit every day, and you're going to develop a palate for it. We're so accustomed to these super sweet and just intensely flavorful foods that it's kind of diminished our taste bud sensitivity. And so just by slowly reducing the amount of seasonings and incorporating organ meats and other foods on a daily basis, and just focusing on lowering your amount of seasoning, you'll develop more of a palate for these types of foods. All right, so that's about it for the issues on a carnivore diet or more of a primal diet. And I just want to end this video by saying we don't all need to be on one particular diet. If you just take a look at indigenous peoples throughout history and look at places all over the world, everybody, literally every group of traditional people is practicing a different style of eating. I see people that are practicing a plant-based diet. They're extremely healthy. They've been doing it for 40 years. And on the other hand, there's people that have been eating nothing but steaks for 20 years, and they're extremely healthy. So there's not just one cookie cutter way of eating that's going to work for everyone. It's the issue is not carbs. The issue is not fat. The issue is not protein. The issue is more so the quality of the food and what our bodies have been adapted for. And so I just encourage everyone that if you're not doing well on a particular diet, change it, do something about it. For example, my partner has been eating eggs on a regular basis, these very eggs that I love to eat, and they were causing gas, bloating, and indigestion, and she has a sensitivity to the egg whites. And so I'm not going to tell her just because it's good for me and working for me to have her keep doing it. It just doesn't make sense. People have different sensitivities and different intolerances and different abilities to process certain foods, especially the plant foods. and dairy and eggs as well. Like, not everyone's going to have the ability to digest and process dairy products or eggs, or say like cruciferous vegetable. For the people that are fruitarian and they've been doing it for 20 years and they have, you know, like nice body composition and they're doing well and they're thriving, it's like, cool. Like, I want to see where you take that and how that works for you. That's really cool. And for the people that are just eating meat, that's cool too. Like, I want to see what we can do. I want to see people thriving, and I want to see people functioning, and I want to see people getting over like the mental and emotional issues and the physiological issues through a more appropriate diet for them. And that's why I make these videos. I don't make these videos because I'm saying that you should only eat animal foods. Dude, I was vegan for 6.5 years. I was fully supporting that as well because that was working for me to an extent for a period of time. But once it stopped serving me, or I felt I needed to make a change, I did. And I'm not going to bash anybody because they're on a different diet. But for anybody to say that one type of diet is like the best diet or like the only diet people should follow, that's just total bullshit, because that has never happened in history and it never will happen. And so if we begin accepting that other people are going to be doing different things and then just focusing on our own health and our own well-being, I think it's just going to help the situation a lot more. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Give this video a thumbs up. You know, subscribe for more content. You can email me at dougoforgan@gmail.com or post some comments and questions below. You know, comment down below, like, what issues are you experiencing? And maybe I can make another video, or you can just email them to me, or, you know, also put down what you guys want to see next. Thank you guys so much. Stay tuned for the next video.